in the chaos. But what if the pattern you follow becomes chaos? You think you can trust your intuition, but it leads you farther and farther astray. When you finally begin to see the light, will you get out while you still can? Or continue the cycle forever? December 31st, 2010. Residents all across the bustling city of Atlanta, Georgia, are ringing in the new year.
It's New Year's Eve in Atlanta. You can just feel the energy in the city. People are getting ready to celebrate. It's a very exciting time to be in Atlanta.
A few miles south of downtown, a group of friends are saying goodbye to 2010 with dancing, drinks, and laughter. But at 12:30 a.m., the jovial scene is shattered when a loud bang sounds from outside.
Everyone rushes outside to see what had happened, and they see their friend Alicia Wells on the ground.
It's not looking good for this woman. There's blood everywhere.
It appears Alicia has been shot in the chest. As her friends rush to her aid, they catch a glimpse of the shooter leaving the scene.
Friend of the victim seen an African-American woman who had a long black ponytail running away.
The partygoers make a flurry of phone calls to the local police department.
This was a serious gunshot wound. They didn't know if she was going to make it.
When police set their sights on the shooter, they'll discover a troubled young woman with a propensity for the wrong relationships. Relationships that seemed to destroy everything in their paths.
You're gonna do anything for someone that you love or that you think love you.
Atlanta native Tiffany Ramey was always admired for her stunning good looks.
She was always into fashion, into makeup, dress-up type things.
The young beauty also had the brains to boot.
Tiffany was always a very smart, bright student. We were always very proud of her.
Tiffany had a mind, a good mind, to be able to do pretty much whatever she wanted, and her aspirations were to become a lawyer.
There was just one problem: money.
I didn't make a lot of money, so, we did the best we could with what we had.
Tiffany grew up in a lower income neighborhood. She and her family didn't have much. They certainly didn't have the funds to send her to law school.
To save up for college, Tiffany took advantage of her good looks and got a job as a dancer at a local strip club.
I made so much money, it just kind of sucked me in. It was exciting. I liked it.
In order to be in that lifestyle of being a stripper, you have to have some strongness about you.
Luckily, Tiffany's boyfriend, Brian, didn't mind her profession.
Brian was well-liked by everyone. Wherever he went, he was getting big ups from people. She was attracted to a guy who is well-liked and respected.
Brian had always made Tiffany feel wanted and cared for. But one night, everything changed.
He was kind of disheveled. He had like some dirt on his pants. And he was like, I got robbed today. And he had this whole elaborate story about some guy pulled a gun on him and he took all of his money.
Tiffany knew they wouldn't be able to make their apartment's rent without that money. But Brian already had a plan.
He was like, well, I have a friend and, he's seen you before and he really likes you. He said he'll put some money in our pocket, if you just spend a little time with him.
Initially, Tiffany was horrified by the suggestion.
I was disgusted by that question. Like, no, who does that? That's not what I do. I would never do that.
She probably felt like I never thought that I would sell my body for money.
All strippers are not into that world.
Eventually, though, Brian wore her down.
Even though she was uncomfortable with the situation, she reluctantly agreed to do it. Even though it was very demeaning and degrading for her.
After that night, Tiffany thought the whole thing was over. But she soon found out his one-time request was the tip of the iceberg.
Brian continued to coax Tiffany into sleeping with other men for money to help pay their bills.
He had been manipulating her for a good bit, using a whole lot of psychological tactics to make her trust him, to care about him. Essentially, he was grooming her.
It wasn't like he worked on my brain. He worked from inside of my brain.
Fortunately, after 4.5 years under Brian's control, Tiffany finally was able to get away from him, away from turning tricks.
It took me a long time to realize that Brian was the manipulator.
She left in the dead of night while Brian was sleeping and never looked back.
By the spring of 2009, Tiffany had all but written men off.
I wasn't a regular girl anymore.
She could not go back to a traditional relationship. Regular guys would not understand what she had been through.
But when she met a charming stranger, 28-year-old Philip Anderson, everything changed.
Philip was so handsome. He definitely commanded the attention of the room. And I couldn't take my eyes off of him.
When Philip and Tiffany started a conversation, the connection was undeniable.
It was different than any other guy she had been with. They had a very deep emotional connection and even a spiritual one, too.
Tiffany bared her soul to Philip about her ex, about what he manipulated her into doing.
He seemed to listen with concern and care, as though what she was saying to him, it mattered.
He was definitely a gentleman. He always asked me how I felt, how you feel, what would you like to do?
The two talked for hours, and Tiffany thought she had finally found a good man who wouldn't judge her for what she'd been through.
We decided that we were going to be an item.
He is basically promising her, I'm going to take care of you. You don't have to worry.
From that moment on, Tiffany and Philip were inseparable.
He made sure that he was better than Brian in every single way. Gave me everything that I wanted that I didn't have while I was with Brian.
She eventually saw Brian as a loser and saw Philip as someone who could be a partner, someone who could also provide for her.
Not only was the emotional connection there, but the physical connection was more than Tiffany had ever thought possible.
When you make love to a woman's mind, then the body follows. And that's what he did.
This was brand new to me. How he made my body feel and how he talked to me. Those were things that really resonated with me.
But soon, Tiffany would find out Philip had more in common with her ex than she thought.
So once you're in that lifestyle, you just move from one bad guy to the other. And it's a sad cycle.
January 1st, 2011, 12:45 a.m. Police have just arrived at a home on the south side of Atlanta, where a 22-year-old woman has been shot.
Alicia Wells had been shot in the chest outside of a New Year's Eve party.
Right now, all that law enforcement has is a vague description of a female who was running away from the crime scene.
Officers move partygoers away from the victim to assess her injuries. To their surprise, Alicia is able to name her shooter.
She said it was a young woman named Tiffany Ramey, but she couldn't say much more. She was in a lot of pain and fading fast.
Police put out an APB for Tiffany Ramey, and the entire city is on lookout.
There was a poster like armed and dangerous. There was a reward out for my arrest. It was absolutely crazy.
Soon, detectives will come face to face with their shooter, only to find out this hardened criminal was really just a woman so in love with her man that she was willing to do whatever it took to keep him.
She realizes, I need to do this in order to prove to him that I'm loyal, that I'm ride or die.
After ending a toxic relationship with her ex, Brian Jones, Tiffany Ramey thought she had found the man of her dreams in 28-year-old Philip Anderson.
After leaving Brian, Tiffany really wanted to gain control over her life. She wanted to be her own woman.
Philip seemed different. He seemed like someone she could trust.
We did everything together, and I felt like he was my best friend.
But soon, Philip would get Tiffany in more trouble than she ever imagined, and send her spiraling into a pattern of abuse and control she couldn't escape.
It's almost like a case of Stockholm Syndrome. She feels like she has to be loyal.
I believed in being a real ride or die.
January 1st, 2011. Just hours after Alicia Wells was shot outside a New Year's house party, Atlanta police are on the hunt for their suspect.
Alicia was able to name Tiffany Ramey as the shooter right away. Police immediately put out an APB for Tiffany.
Fortunately, Alicia is expected to make a full recovery. As police scour the area for Tiffany, detectives head to the hospital to interview their victim about what happened.
Alicia told detectives that she and Tiffany had actually been friends.
She says the whole incident is a blur. She remembers fighting with Tiffany and then a gunshot. And the next thing she remembers is waking up in the hospital.
Detectives ask Alicia what sparked the fight, but Alicia says it all happened so fast, she's having trouble remembering.
Alicia says they'd been growing apart lately, getting in some little cat fights here and there, but nothing like this.
She was shocked that her friend would do something like this to her. It was out of character.
At this point, the motivation behind this brutal attack was still a mystery.
Detectives thank Alicia for her time and head back to the drawing board.
Cops needed to find Tiffany ASAP before she hurt someone else.
Days pass without any sign of Tiffany. But as detectives try to plan their next move, they get an unexpected break.
Law enforcement gets a tip as to where Tiffany is hiding.
Someone dimed her out. They found her.
Police race to an apartment complex just outside of the city, where they locate their shooter. Tiffany Ramey is taken into custody without incident. But it's clear the 26-year-old is overcome with emotion.
She's unsure of what her future will be.
I couldn't believe it. I was devastated. Like, I couldn't even understand.
Back in Atlanta, detectives sit down with their suspect. They begin by telling Tiffany that Alicia has survived the attack and has named her as the shooter.
To their surprise, Tiffany is relieved to hear that Alicia's alive.
This is great because she's not dead. But this is bad because now she's going to be able to tell me.
Knowing she's cornered, Tiffany confesses to the shooting.
Tiffany knows at this point she can't hide any longer. Guilt has been eating her alive.
Tiffany admits that as soon as she and Alicia spotted each other outside of the party, things escalated quickly.
I told her, Alicia. I remember her hitting me in my eye.
Tiffany tells detectives that in that moment, she did the unthinkable.
Tiffany pulled out a gun.
And I pulled the trigger. And when I backed up, she was down. It was blood everywhere.
Tiffany thinks that she kills this girl after shooting her. These intense feelings of fear and sadness were definitely overwhelming for Tiffany.
She was my friend. I couldn't understand how I could have killed my friend.
She ran away from the scene and ultimately went on the run.
It's quite a story. But there's one thing not clear: why the beef with Alicia escalated in the first place. When detectives ask Tiffany to clarify, they're taken aback by her reaction.
When detectives ask her to explain her motivations behind the attack, she clams up and decides to ask for a lawyer.
I said I don't have to talk to nobody.
Detectives are puzzled at Tiffany's sudden change in demeanor.
They know she's hiding something, or perhaps protecting someone.
Though detectives believe there's more to Tiffany's story than she's revealing, they arrest her and charge her with attempted murder.
I was devastated. This is supposed to go differently.
But soon, someone will come forward that will clear up the holes in Tiffany's story.
She followed his lead. She learned his rules. She's not going to leave. Where's she going?
I let myself get beside myself. I felt like it was Philip's spirit inside of me.
January 2011. Atlanta police have 26-year-old Tiffany Ramey in custody for the shooting of her friend, 22-year-old Alicia Wells. But there's one element of the investigation still missing: the motive.
Neither Alicia or Tiffany were able to give them a clear motive for the crime.
Alicia said this seemed out of character for her friend, and she didn't remember much from the night of the shooting.
Tiffany confessed to the crime, but when it came to talk about motive, she clammed up and asked for a lawyer.
Detectives know Tiffany is holding something back, but it's clear they aren't going to learn the truth from her.
At this time, Tiffany would not budge.
Days pass, and just when detectives think the case has hit a dead end, they catch a lucky break.
An old friend of Tiffany's, Raven Palmer, comes forward.
Raven tells detectives she knows the shooting looks bad and that she doesn't condone what Tiffany did, but she wants to give officers the full story in an attempt to help her friend.
Raven says Tiffany doesn't want to be a snitch, but she did what she did at the direction of her man, Philip Anderson.
Raven tells detectives that at first, Philip was like a dream come true for Tiffany.
Tiffany believed that she and Philip were partners. They were a team. She thought he loved her.
He acknowledged her past and agreed to be there for her no matter what. He promised he'd never hurt her.
But Raven says eventually, another side of Philip began to emerge, and Tiffany started to lose herself for her man again.
Raven tells detectives about Tiffany's tumultuous relationship with her ex, Brian Jones.
Tiffany was still looking for her knight in shining armor. Unfortunately, she didn't see that Philip was just the same as Brian.
Raven claims it all started when Philip asked for Tiffany's help in acquiring some drugs, and Tiffany agreed.
felt like, well, this is my chance to show him what I really got. This was my opportunity to prove myself to him.
But Raven claims the drug deal went horribly wrong.
It was all a setup for a robbery. The dealer had someone hiding in the bushes outside the house.
He pops out of the bushes with a baseball bat and hits me in my face. He hit me so hard, it felt like sand in my mouth. I remember thinking, I'm not even crying yet. What is this liquid? It was blood. It was everywhere.
Raven says the incident broke Tiffany's jaw, fractured her teeth, and split her lip.
My teeth were wired shut for 8 weeks.
Raven tells detectives that even though the incident was traumatic for Tiffany, she loved Philip's attentiveness after the fact.
He would hold my mouth all the way shut so that it would relieve the pressure of the wires long enough for me to go to sleep. I really felt like he loved me.
But according to Raven, when Tiffany's wires came off 8 weeks later, Philip flipped a switch.
When they took the wires off, he was like, okay, so you know it's time for you to get back to work, right?
He wanted her to get back to work at the strip club, but he also wanted her to assist in more drug deals, which must have been terrifying for Tiffany after what happened the first time.
I felt like I owed him because he took care of me.
He made Tiffany feel like he loved her. You're gonna do anything for someone that you love or that you think love you.
But despite Tiffany's devotion to Philip, Raven says her friend's hell was only just beginning.
He started putting hands on her.
I had the most severe ass whooping I ever had in my life. I was absolutely afraid of him.
January 2011. 26-year-old Tiffany Ramey sits in a jail cell, awaiting sentencing for shooting her friend, Alicia Wells, outside of a house party on New Year's Eve.
Police know she's guilty of the crime, but what they don't yet understand is the motive.
However, Tiffany's friend Raven Palmer has come forward with the promise of shedding new light on the investigation.
Raven claims Tiffany is a good person at heart, and all this happened as a result of Tiffany being involved with the wrong man.
That man was Philip Anderson.
According to Raven, Philip had gotten Tiffany wrapped up in his drug trade business, and things only got worse from there.
If he gave me a quota and I met it, then I came home and everything was fine. If not, I'll get my ass whooped.
Raven says when the beatings got worse, Tiffany tried to leave Philip for good.
I knew he would be looking for me because that is the kind of guy he was. So I tried to stay in places where I knew he didn't know a lot of people, which wasn't very many.
Raven tells detectives that before long, Philip tracked Tiffany down.
He was like, oh, so you're not ever coming back home. And I was like, what? Listen, no beef. I just need some time. And I remember thinking, I really don't want to go with him because he had beat me so severely previously that I just didn't want to go.
Against her better judgment, Tiffany eventually broke down and let Philip into the car.
He was asking me questions, and I remember I just let all my feelings come out. I told him, I don't want to be with you no more. I really can't stand you. And when the words came out of my mouth, he reached back. He put his gun to my thigh, and he pulled the trigger. And then he pointed the gun at my face, and he told me, find the bullet, or I'm gonna pull the trigger again. And at this time, I'm freaked out. Okay, there's a hole in my leg, and I'm bleeding.
Raven says despite her friend's pain, Tiffany did as her man instructed.
I reached down into the bottom of the floorboard, and I gave it to him. He threw it out the window.
Fortunately, Philip allowed Tiffany to go to the hospital to get her leg treated, as long as she stayed quiet about what really happened.
I was in a lot of pain. I got shot with a 9mm and went all the way through. It shattered my femur bone.
Tiffany should have been way done, but she still won't give up on him.
Raven says although Tiffany was honest with her about what happened, she lied to police about the incident, just like Philip asked.
I told him I shot myself. And they told me you're lying. When you decide to tell what really happened, you give us a call. And I remember kicking the card out the bed onto the floor and thinking, I would really like to tell, but what would be the repercussions of this? I felt like if I had told them that he would probably come back and kill me.
She knows that this is a very dangerous man. So she protected him, not just out of love and loyalty. She protected him because she was scared.
Raven explains that Tiffany went back to Philip after being released from the hospital and never reported the shooting to officials. But things only got crazier from there.
Things got worse and they got worse, and she never saw that they were getting worse.
He had bigger plans for her. He had her exactly where he wanted her, right along for the ride.
The truth was, he was using her past against her.
Atlanta detectives are hearing a harrowing tale of abuse and manipulation from Raven Palmer, a friend of Tiffany Ramey.
Tiffany Ramey was in jail awaiting sentencing for the shooting of Alicia Wells, who survived, and ID'd Tiffany as the shooter.
Raven claims this whole altercation stemmed from Tiffany's abusive relationship with Philip Anderson.
If she stepped out of line, he would beat her and had even shot her in the leg on one occasion. She was loyal to a fault and never reported the shooting to authorities.
Raven tells detectives that eventually, Tiffany's world got even crazier.
Philip decided that the money they were bringing in wasn't enough.
He wanted Tiffany to help him recruit young women for a prostitution ring.
He knew Tiffany's past would be helpful to them in this new venture.
According to Raven, Philip assured Tiffany she would be his right hand in managing the girls and would never have to put her own body on the line like she did with her ex, Brian.
She wouldn't have to sleep with anyone, just the other girls would.
Well, I didn't know what to think at first. You know what I mean? I loved him, and that's all that mattered to me.
With Philip not necessarily wanting Tiffany to sell her body, it made her feel valued, that this man really loves me.
Raven says that ultimately, Tiffany gave in. She even took the lead in helping to recruit the other women.
She learned his tactics. She learned his rules. She got the women, girls are gonna come with her because she's a pretty girl, and they're more open to women.
We got other girls that came to live with us. For these girls, I was their mom. And I used to explain just like this, listen, I promise you can have nice hair, you can have nice nails too. But tonight you're gonna have to give all your money to him.
She dealt with the girls, encouraging them to have their own savings and checking accounts, because she realized if they didn't take care of that, they would end up with nothing, and she didn't want that for them.
However, if Tiffany got too overly friendly with the girls, Philip was quick to assert his dominance.
Philip is the one who's in power and making all of the decisions.
He needs to establish himself as being, the king of the castle. He needs to make sure that Tiffany never starts to consider herself separate and apart from him.
Raven tells detectives that just 3 months later, Philip got arrested for shooting a man at a store in a blind rage.
Luckily, the man survived Philip's wrath, and Phillips was charged with aggravated battery.
Philip gets convicted and is sentenced to 30 years.
With Philip behind bars, Raven believed Tiffany would finally get out of her man's grasp. But Philip's manipulation continued through constant phone calls.
He was like, I'm sorry for all the things I ever did wrong to you. And I want you to know, I really do love you.
She still had this attachment, this belief that she needed this man.
Raven says Philip made Tiffany agree to keep the prostitution ring running while he served out his sentence.
He encourages her to maintain this business in his absence. And he even uses the word legacy, as if this is your legacy.
He would tell her that she needed to remain in total control of the business at all times and do whatever it took to stay on top.
That's when Raven offers more to the shooting story than Tiffany or Alicia told detectives.
Alicia was one of Philip's girls, one that Tiffany was in charge of.
Alicia hadn't mentioned this in her interview with detectives. They think she didn't want to tell them she'd been working as a prostitute.
Raven says in the weeks leading up to the New Year's Eve shooting, Tiffany felt like Alicia had been hurting the reputation of the business.
Alicia was very bad on the dope. In my mind, I was gonna help her get off of the dope.
When she told Philip about Alicia's behavior, he was furious.
He was pissed. He said that this is my business. This is how we get money. I have a reputation to uphold, and I promised them top of the line girls, and this does not reflect that.
He told Tiffany that it was all her fault that Alicia had gotten out of line. He said she needed to do a better job keeping control. He said he was incredibly disappointed in her.
Even from behind prison walls, he still was in control of Tiffany's mind.
Raven says on New Year's Eve, when Tiffany spotted Alicia, Philip's words were echoing in her friend's head.
And I remember Philip saying, you can never lose control or allow somebody to get out of control. And in my mind, that's what was happening right now.
She did what she had seen Philip do in that situation. One of the girls got out of line, so she beat her back into submission.
She goes from a promiser and a protector to a punisher.
But Alicia fought back.
She feels like she's losing the battle against this girl. She knows Philip would never stand for this.
In my mind, I thought I could not let this situation end like this.
She could hear Philip's voice, guiding her, telling her to take back control.
She wanted to make him proud and prove that she could handle the situation.
She pulled a weapon on her and used it. She shot this girl.
Raven says Tiffany called her after the incident and told her everything that had happened.
Tiffany told Raven she needed to go into hiding and might never see her again.
When Raven found out that Tiffany had been arrested, she knew she needed to come forward to help her friend.
She knew Tiffany was not a bad person. She believed Tiffany had fallen for the wrong man and had been manipulated into someone she couldn't recognize.
But will Raven's statement be enough? Or will Tiffany face a lifetime behind bars? Soon, another character witness comes forward on Tiffany's behalf. And authorities can't believe who.
I couldn't believe that this was happening.
June 28th, 2011. Tiffany Ramey is in prison, awaiting sentencing on charges of attempted murder.
I felt horrible, and I just kind of lost myself.
That's when Tiffany gets a letter from someone she never expected. It's from Alicia Wells, the woman she had shot.
It was like, look, I'm sorry this happened between us. I hope you don't get in trouble for this. I really don't want this to be how the end of your life is.
This was a huge shift for Tiffany. Once she was forgiven, once she was given a second chance, then that set the pace for her to move forward.
The forgiveness from her former friend was stunning, but it wasn't the only shock Tiffany had gotten during her time behind bars. Tiffany was pregnant.
She had a one-night stand when she was on the run.
Though the timing was far from ideal, Tiffany took her pregnancy as a blessing.
I prayed to God. You know, I've always wanted to be pregnant. I've always wanted to have a baby.
As for Philip's prostitution ring, without Tiffany there to guide the other women, his operation fell apart.
All the women took what money they had made there and left to do their own thing.
In December of 2011, Tiffany goes before the judge.
I explained to the judge, you know, I know what I did, but let me tell you why. And I know what my record looks like, but let me tell you this, I never had a reason to do anything right in my whole life. Please don't take me away from my baby.
Tiffany's lawyer offers the letter from Alicia to bolster their request for leniency.
That letter turned out to be one of the determining factors in my case. The judge told me, I don't know why I want to help you, but this is what we're going to do.
The judge gives Tiffany probation for time served and orders her to complete 5 years of community service.
I get to go home with my baby in the free world. I knew God had something for me to do in my life.
Tiffany and her family are overjoyed.
I did feel relieved. I think we all did. I think we all felt like we could breathe a little.
We were just happy, really happy to have her home.
To this day, Tiffany Ramey credits her son for saving her life.
I named him Messiah because he saved me. And I changed everything about my life.
Tiffany has completely cut ties with both Brian and Philip. She is now committed to building a future for herself and her son.
She has full custody of her son. In addition to that, most importantly, she has a meaningful relationship with her family, and that's a beautiful thing.
She's showing us that she wants to be in a better place, and our arms are open.
Something is clicked for her. She wants it. She wants her life back.
After being manipulated by not one, but 2 men, Tiffany has learned that being someone's ride or die is not love, but a betrayal of yourself.
I didn't take that advice, and look at all the things that's happened to me. I've been shot. I've had all my teeth knocked out with a baseball bat. I've been to prison and back. This is my healing, to be able to help another girl that might be headed down my same path and say, hey, don't go down there. Life can get better, how there is a chance for people like us.
Patterns can save us, or they can destroy us. When a pattern becomes dangerous, you run the risk of losing it all and being swallowed whole by that which you can't escape. Breaking the cycle isn't easy, but in the end, it's worth it. Abuse is never okay. If you or someone you love is in an abusive relationship, there is help available. Call the Domestic Violence Hotline at 1-800-799-SAFE.
Orlando, Florida single mother Angel Glenn does whatever it takes to support her toddler.
She was a stripper and men fawned over her.
But when she hooks up with a bad boy, Angel crosses over from a world of seduction into a life of crime.
Angel was trying to find herself and being intrigued by this young man who had money because he sold drugs.
She was very much in love with him. She had no idea that she was setting up a bloodbath.
And later, in Hershey, Pennsylvania, desperate housewife Carolyn King abandons her family in search of a fresh start, only to find her perfect match in a local convict.
They were just in love, infatuated, and smitten. I think she just wooed him in such a way that he just couldn't resist.
But it turns out to be a match made in hell for anyone who gets in the way of Carolyn and her man.
They had her stripped naked, placed the gun at her head, and pulled the trigger.
They were as thick as thieves. They would do anything for each other.
There are hundreds of thousands of women in prison at any given time in the U.S. These are the true stories of women who committed heinous crimes in the name of love. For my man. Orlando, Florida may be the happiest place on earth for some, but not for child of divorce Angel Glenn, who's kept on a short leash by her mother.
The breakup of the marriage might have caused her mom to be more sheltering of Angel.
A dutiful daughter and a model student, Angel seems to be destined for a life on the straight and narrow until puberty hits and the good girl turns into a voluptuous teenager overnight.
For Angel, growing up in a home where her father wasn't a steady influence in her life perhaps put her at risk for being a little boy crazy. In other words, trying to find her father through as many male figures as she could.
And it doesn't take long for Angel to go from discovering boys to getting pregnant.
Angel had a baby when she was 18 years old, and the father of this little boy was not involved in her life.
Where are you going? She drops out of school, but her church-going mother blames the men Angel runs with for leading her astray.
There is this tendency for good girls to like bad boys, and it seems that Angel may have fallen prey to that particular pattern.
Determined to get her on the right track, Angel's mom tells her daughter she needs to get a job to support her son or get out of the house. But Angel knows her options are limited, and the only thing she believes she has going for herself are her looks.
She's a pretty girl, and pretty girls like attention. So Angel began to perform as a stripper at private parties.
Stripping yields quick, easy cash that you would out-earn your counterparts that are working at a local drive-in or a fast food restaurant.
And it's during a night out that Angel happens to attract the attention of 22-year-old twin brothers, Dante and Dante Hall.
They're very, very difficult to tell apart. The only distinctive feature is Dante has a tattoo on his neck, and it says, "Money ain't a thing."
Despite Dante's best efforts, Angel finds herself drawn to Dante, who seems to be the one in charge.
Dante was the more aggressive and certainly the more assertive of the two, and the two of them were dedicated to each other, but basically Dante followed Dante's lead.
Angel was very attracted to Dante because, unlike his twin, Dante was much, much more aggressive, much more the bad boy. And certainly Angel had this very rebellious spirit.
Not only are the Hall brothers identical twins, they share the same profession. Both are major cocaine dealers with a reputation for ruthlessness that is well known and feared throughout all of Orlando.
They had developed a certain clientele among the crack users in particular. And so people knew that if you wanted to buy crack, that you would go to see Dante and Dante.
Dante had this danger in his lifestyle that she just was drawn to.
The attraction is instant and mutual, and Angel and Dante dive into a relationship that lasts the entire summer.
They stayed together at various motels and would get together as much as they could.
Angel seems at ease as the girlfriend of a notorious drug dealer, leaving her son with her mother for long stretches to spend more time with Dante, who has now graduated from merely dealing drugs to robbing other drug dealers.
The one thing about choosing criminals as your victims is that criminals don't typically call the police for help.
Dante finds another way to make money as well, by helping himself to a cut of the money Angel makes from dancing.
And this became an opportunity for Angel to embed herself into his life, to be able to take care of him and give him the things that would sustain him.
Life goes on this way for several weeks. Until one day, when Angel receives a call from a man named Billy Robinson, a potential client Angel met a few days earlier.
Billy and Angel met in Orlando, and Angel made it clear that she was willing to dance for money.
So you all are gonna take care of us then?
And so through Billy, this party got set up for Friday night at a place in Eustis, which is about an hour's drive away from Orlando. At one point, Billy told her, "You be sure to get your girls because we're gonna be giving you a lot of money."
Dante is present and is overhearing both sides of the conversation via the speakerphone.
After hearing the phone call, Dante's thinking, guys with all that money to spend on strippers, they must be rolling in cash.
And Dante, the consummate businessman, comes up with a plan. He and his crew will rob the party, and Angel will serve as bait.
She willingly went along with it because that was her boyfriend, and Angel, at one level, understood that her boyfriend was potentially dangerous.
In Orlando, Florida, private dancer Angel Glenn and her boyfriend Dante Hall plan to rob a party of one of Angel's clients. All she has to do is follow Dante's lead.
Once Angel is inside the party, Dante and friends will enter the party to rob the patrons there.
Girl, get up. What are you doing?
That afternoon, Angel calls two girlfriends she's worked with before to dance at the party with her, while Dante calls his brother and they plan the robbery. Later that night, Angel and the girls make the hour-long drive to Eustis, followed by Dante, and a neighborhood friend.
Angel did not convey to the other dancers that a robbery was about to take place.
In no time, Angel and the girls are on the scene in Eustis, and the party is underway, while Dante and his crew sit tight in a car down the street.
The girls had started dancing, the guys were drinking, there was a little drug use in the party. So it was a very festive atmosphere.
But Angel never forgets the real why and who she's there for.
There were a number of phone calls back and forth between Dante and Angel. Dante was asking her, how many guys are there? Do they have guns? What room are you guys in? And he instructed her to try to entice everybody into one place, because, of course, it would be easier for them to control the crowd if they were all in one spot. So she did as she was instructed.
Girls were dancing, the girls were being tipped, the guys were drinking, they were laughing, joking, having a good time.
When Angel has everything set just the way Dante wants it, that's when he and his crew make their entrance.
Dante was the first one in the house, and he was armed with an assault rifle, an AK-47, which on the street they call a chapa. And right behind him were his brother, Dante, and a third guy carrying 9mm pistols. And Dante ordered everybody to get on the ground. He said that if they didn't do what they were told, he was going to make this chapa dance.
Angel hits the floor with everyone else. And while she may be the one who set all this up, even she isn't prepared for what happens next.
Then as they were on the floor, they were also reaching for the money and the jewelry that they wanted for a reason that is still really not clear, other than the fact that perhaps he wanted to get the partygoers to understand he was serious. Dante fires off a couple rounds with the AK-47.
Dante fires at the concrete ceiling and the bullets ricochet, hitting several partygoers, killing a man named Anthony Blunt.
Dante continued to spray the place. His girlfriend, Angel, was in just as much danger as any of the other partygoers or the other dancers.
He disregards her safety, and that should have been a moment for Angel to have a second thought about the relationship that she has with Dante.
She probably didn't think that Dante was capable of such acts at that moment because she loved him.
So far, the take from the robbery is just under $1,500 and some jewelry, much less than Dante expected. He's not happy.
And he and his friends fired off a few rounds to emphasize that they meant business and they wanted the rest of the money. Zahn Evans, who was one of the higher-ups in the group, said, "All right, you want more money."
It's in the back of the shoebox.
Dante sends Dante to look for the money, which doesn't really exist.
Yo, it's nothing here.
When Dante returns to the main room empty-handed, Angel sees just how far Dante's willing to take this.
He's angry at the fact that one of the partygoers lied to him, and so at that moment, he decides to teach a guy a lesson.
He locates Zahn and shoots him in the head.
Realizing there isn't going to be a larger payoff, Dante and his crew take off, leaving the girls behind.
I believe Angel was caught off guard, and that although she knew she was helping her boyfriend come in and rob some folks who was just there to party, she did not expect that people were going to die as a result of it.
In all, 5 men were shot, 4 by ricocheting bullets, 1 fatally. And Zahn Evans was executed.
It's a complete miracle that anybody walked out of there. The fact that you had someone who was firing off an AK-47 is amazing that anybody left that room.
Angel and the other girls, both in shock, flee the scene. On their way back to Orlando, Angel comes clean with her fellow dancers and admits to helping set up the robbery.
One of the girls says, "You're stupid. Why did you ever endanger our lives like this? You could have been killed. We could have been killed. Why would you do something like that?"
Angel says something like, "This is how Dante and I make money now."
Here is Angel involved in a situation where people were hurt and killed, and she's bragging about it to all of them. And this speaks to me of a process of dissociation.
After the girls make it back to Orlando, Angel and Dante reconnect.
She saw up close and personal what Dante was capable of doing. She was definitely afraid.
I think she realized what she stood to lose. 2 days later, one of the dancers provided the law enforcement officers with a break in the case.
And in the aftermath of their robbery gone wrong, Angel Glenn and Dante Hall are forced to choose between love or self-preservation. And later in Hershey, Pennsylvania, Carolyn King finds her soulmate in a soulless ex-con.
She's getting a high, she's getting excitement, she's getting a thrill. And so sometimes people keep seeking that pleasure, so they engage in the crime over and over again.
What began as a raucous house party in Eustis, Florida, turned into a bloodbath after a robbery gone wrong, orchestrated by stripper Angel Glenn and her boyfriend Dante Hall. Having made off with less than $1,500 in cash and some watches, gold chains, and rings, a disgruntled Dante orders Angel to pawn the jewelry.
Dante has an outstanding warrant for murder. And so if he were to pawn something in his name, that's something that might turn up in a system that shows that he is, 1, local, and 2, that he's been involved in a serious robbery where people died.
Angel does what she's told, sacrificing her anonymity and risking her freedom to please the love of her life.
It is a pretty stupid thing to do for Angel to put her name on a pawn slip for goods that are tied to a homicide.
It's quite clear from a psychological point of view that Angel just stopped thinking. She was just invested in this relationship with Dante, and she just was not looking at what her actions were and what the consequences were going to be.
But it's not the jewelry that implicates the couple. It's one of the other dancers who comes forward 3 nights after the robbery.
Danielle, one of the dancers, hears that 2 people died in the robbery. And she goes to the police to say that Angel and her boyfriend Dante were involved in the robbery where the 2 people died.
This was our first break in this case. Up until then, this was truly a whodunit.
2 days later, police track Angel down and bring her in for questioning. Dante is nowhere to be found.
I just don't feel like talking right now.
The interrogation went on for several hours, and her demeanor was defiant and deceptive throughout.
Angel lied multiple times to the law enforcement officer, saying that she didn't have any information, and then once she said that she did have some information, she kept saying that Dante wasn't involved.
Angel lied to protect Dante several times during the investigation. Eventually, she went on to say that she lied only to protect her family, but it appears she lied in reality only to get more of Dante's love and to prove to him that she was worthy of all of his affection and love.
Angel quickly changes her mind upon learning she could face the death penalty.
In Florida, even though she didn't squeeze the trigger, didn't want anybody to be shot, she was instrumental in the robbery during which somebody got shot. And as a result, she is legally responsible for the homicides.
With the possibility of lethal injection or a life sentence in front of her, Angel Glenn strikes a deal. She confesses to setting up the robbery and gives police the name of the motel where Dante is currently hiding out.
Her mother influenced her to cooperate because her mom could talk to her about the possibility of never being able to see her son on the outside again, and that she would never get to raise him. And I'm sure that the maternal instinct at some point had an impact on her decision to cooperate.
Dante and his twin are arrested without incident. Angel is released on bond, with one of the conditions being that she not have any contact with Dante, who sits in jail awaiting trial. But Angel still loves him too much to stay away.
Dante received a number of letters from her, including photos, and one of them, she's got her ankle monitor on at the time. So we know that the picture was taken while she was out on bond.
Angel wanted to have her cake and eat it too. On the one hand, she still wanted to be part of Dante's life, even though she was told not to be in contact with him. But on the other hand, she also wanted her freedom, which is something that she had.
For violating the terms of her release, Angel is thrown back in jail, where she remains for several months until the Hall brothers go on trial.
There was no further communication of any sort between them.
Thanks to Angel's testimony, Dante and Dante Hall are found guilty on 2 counts of murder, 1 count of attempted murder, armed robbery, and conspiracy. Dante is sentenced to death and is currently on death row. Dante gets life without parole. It's now Angel Glenn's turn to face the music. She's sentenced to 10 years for conspiracy to commit murder.
She did express that she was sorry for what happened. I think she was in love with the idea of being in love, and Dante embodied power for her, and she was attracted to the power.
Looking at Angel Glenn in her situation, is she a threat to society? Probably not by herself. But however, watch out, because if she gets with someone who is dangerous, then that can have some really bad consequences.
When I first met Angel, she was a wannabe thug girlfriend. And soon that facade of the hard street girl fell away because that really wasn't her lifestyle. The real Angel is actually a pretty nice person.
Angel Glenn's desire for adventure in her life drove her to commit senseless acts in the name of love. A fate destined to be shared by Hershey, Pennsylvania transplant Carolyn King, who falls for a man she's willing to do anything to hold on to. Raised by her grandparents in Virginia, Carolyn King's early years aren't the most ideal.
She grew up in a family that they didn't have the most money. There were some issues of sexual abuse, even I think some drug abuse involved.
Looking to correct a void in her life, Carolyn gets married at 20 and has 2 children. But after 6 years of marriage, she feels like her best years are falling behind her. At 26, Carolyn walks out on her family and hits the road in search of something new.
Having kids isn't something that you can undo. She must have felt trapped. Something must have been really wrong in that marriage or with Carolyn herself.
What we call it in the field is structural dislocation. When either by force or by choice, they have attachment to their family, but it's not a true attachment, and they just up and leave and abandon them. And this is what we see with Carolyn.
But with limited means and no reliable transportation, Carolyn doesn't get very far, only making it to Hershey, Pennsylvania, some 200 miles away.
And she got a job working in a plant that broke down bulk candy into smaller packaging for retail purposes.
She didn't have family there. She didn't have friends there. She really had no contacts or connection.
The only thing Carolyn has is a job so routine, it leaves the restless 26-year-old wanting more. A desire shared by 20-year-old Brad Martin, a recent hire at the factory who helps take some of the edge off.
Brad was a handsome young man. You know, he was tall, very young, good-looking guy.
Still relatively new to the job herself, Carolyn forges an instant bond with Brad, who also happens to be serving time at the Lebanon County Prison just up the road.
Brad had been in and out of the county prison for a variety of drug charges, a burglary charge, and violated the terms of that probation and was reincarcerated for that.
He was serving a sentence of 6 to 23 months.
He was granted work release privileges that allowed him to go out and work for an 8-hour day and then return to the prison for overnight.
Though only on the job a few weeks, Brad has already made a new friend in Carolyn.
They started to develop a relationship. More than just a working relationship, they developed a romantic relationship.
She really liked him, and it didn't matter that he was on work release.
Carolyn thinks bad boy Bradley is just the ticket out of her humdrum life, and she's about to show just how far she's willing to go to keep this young man around.
They were willing to sacrifice any and everything, including someone else's life.
Carolyn was in love with Bradley, and she was under the influence of Bradley Martin.
In Hershey, Pennsylvania, 26-year-old Carolyn King falls head over heels for 20-year-old convict Brad Martin.
Carolyn was a good-looking African-American woman. Brad was a handsome young man. So, of course, there's those sexual urges.
But with their encounters limited to the workplace, tensions between them are about to reach a breaking point. So Brad puts in a request at the prison for a 4-hour furlough. Based on his good behavior, his request is granted.
Carolyn met Brad at the prison, and they went over to a motel that was fairly close.
The encounter is unlike anything either has experienced before.
We need to do this more often.
And it leaves Carolyn wanting more.
The intimacy that Carolyn and Brad had must have been so intense that they immediately formed this bond and needed one another, became dependent on one another. There was just absolutely no way that they were going to give up this relationship.
But there's only one way Carolyn and Brad can be together.
At the motel, they decided that Brad was not going to return to prison.
Carolyn has found what she was looking for, a new man. And and she's determined not to let him go.
I can only speculate that it was Carolyn's ideal that he not return.
We don't have money, where are we gonna go?
Brad had a relatively short period of time to go till the completion of his probation violation and his release.
Carolyn and Brad want a fresh start, and to do that, they need money. Brad knows an easy mark, who they should be able to charm into helping them. 74-year-old retired florist, Guy Goodman, who lives in Palmyra, just one town over.
Guy was involved in the prison outreach through his church. That's how he got to meet Brad, and he was really just trying to help him.
Hey, Guy, it's Brad.
Brad tells Guy he's on a furlough and wants to see him. He takes the bait and invites Brad over.
Guy had written several letters to Brad and had gone to visit him at the county prison on a couple of occasions, trying to get Brad back on a correct path.
Carolyn and Brad hitch a ride to Guy's home, just a few miles from the motel.
I believe they shared some coffee. But somewhere during that meeting, the conversation changed from, how are you doing, to, I need money, I need you to help me.
I need some money.
Guy tried to reason with him, tried to get him to go back to the prison.
But by now, Brad has already missed his scheduled return time, making him a fugitive. He and Carolyn know they have to get out of Pennsylvania.
Brad kept asking for money to get out of town. Guy kept insisting that he should return to the prison and get his life straightened out.
And Bradley became angry and picked up a vase and hit him with it.
Guy Goodman is struck over the head with the vase, which knocks him to the floor, opens a pretty large gash and wound in the back of his head.
They took a telephone cord, wrapped it around his neck, tied it to his hands, and then also to his feet.
At the same time, they took a sheet of plastic and wrapped him in the sheet of plastic, then took a bedspread and wrapped that around him, and then a terry cloth robe that was wrapped around the exterior of all of that.
The brutality perpetrated against Guy by these two individuals, in many ways, was a representation as to what they felt was an obstacle that had been put in their way by society, by their past, and they would do anything at this point to keep moving on together in the future, even if it meant eliminating Guy brutally.
Leaving Guy Goodman to suffocate, Carolyn and Brad hunt around the house to get what they came for.
While he was dying, Carolyn and Brad pretty much ransacked the house.
They found his credit card, grabbed some checks out of his checkbook, found his car keys, and left.
In less than an hour, Carolyn and Brad have left Guy for dead, stolen his money and his car, and are on the run. With no destination in mind other than the need to get out of Pennsylvania, they head west.
They took his car and started driving, using his credit card, using his checkbook along the way.
They were shopping sprees, buying purses, cosmetics, just town after town after town.
Even though they're on the run, their desire for one another can't be denied.
They also spent money on women's undergarments. They would just go to stores and buy all of this stuff.
Brad's involved with this slightly older woman, Carolyn, and she has her feminine ways and feminine wiles. And so she knows by buying all this sexy lingerie, this is a way that she could represent herself to the utmost.
10 days later, Guy's body is found by a concerned neighbor, and police are called. Already on the lookout for escaped prisoner Brad Martin, it doesn't take long for detectives to put two and two together.
Guy had sent letters, and he also did a couple of visits to Brad while he was incarcerated.
We went back to the county, looked and learned that there was written correspondence as well as visits between Guy and Bradley Martin, which gave us a pretty good lead that it was Bradley Martin who may have done this.
Now with Hershey police hot on their heels, the fugitives must stay one step ahead of authorities, and there's no end to the violence they will perpetrate.
They shot her, left her naked, alone, hoping that the coyotes and other animals would dispose of the body.
What Carolyn did for Brad can never be undone.
Love-struck murderers Carolyn King and Bradley Martin are on the lam after killing 74-year-old florist Guy Goodman in Palmyra, Pennsylvania. Still riding on Guy's dime, Carolyn and Brad make it to North Dakota when they decide to head south to Mexico.
It's not a short drive from North Dakota, and this was funded from Guy's credit cards.
But they don't get far, thanks to a vigilant motel clerk in Bismarck, North Dakota, suspicious of the couple who claimed to have no photo ID.
They attempted to check into a motel, and a clerk there had questioned the authenticity of and validity of their utilizing the card and pushed a code into the system which stopped its usage.
The couple then tries to use one of Guy Goodman's checks, only to find out his accounts have been closed. With rapidly diminishing funds, the two are pushed to the point of desperation.
They needed money, they needed it bad, and they weren't afraid to do whatever they had to.
Having killed Guy Goodman, Carolyn and Brad know they have nothing to lose when they spot 59-year-old vacationer Donna Martz.
Donna lived in Devil's Lake, which was a couple of hours away from Bismarck, so she was traveling alone. She was well-dressed. She looked well-to-do.
They saw Donna Martz as another source to finance their escape. They followed her down the hallway.
As Donna arrived at her door and put the key in to unlock it, they came up behind her.
Don't move.
Carolyn pulls a knife on Donna and tells her to do what they say and nobody will get hurt.
Donna Martz had a car. Plus, she probably also had a fresh supply of money, credit cards, checks, maybe even cash.
They wanted to get to where they wanted to get, start a new life, and live happily ever after. And Donald just happened to be that one person there at the wrong place at the wrong time.
Carolyn and Brad force the petrified Donna into the trunk and take off south toward Mexico, one step closer to their dream of a life together. Over the next 5 days, Carolyn and Brad go on another spending spree, courtesy of Donna Martz. She's still in the trunk, surviving on what little food and water they give her.
They simply kept her alive, bound in the car, so that they could continue to use the resources of her credit cards and her cash.
They forced her to give them her PIN number. They went to the ATM, used her PIN to withdraw cash.
But after days in the trunk, a desperate Donna reaches her breaking point.
So she starts to make noise. And if you're in a parking lot at a mall or any type of store, that should get the attention of somebody. Unfortunately, it just got the attention of Brad and Carolyn.
A furious Carolyn gets behind the wheel and drives out to the middle of nowhere.
Carolyn and Bradley, who had kept Donna alive so they could use her funds, now reach a tipping point with her. She's acting out in the trunk, trying to draw attention to her plight, and she could possibly get them caught. And so at this point, they become enraged with her.
They pull her out of the trunk, they stab her, they make her strip naked.
And Donna's nightmare doesn't end there.
Only people without a conscience can take the life of a person so callously and leave them for the vermin to dispose of their transgressions.
Carolyn King and her boyfriend Bradley Martin take their multi-state crime spree to a whole new level in North Dakota when their hostage Donna Martz tries to get away.
They were very angry, and they sped away from the parking lot with Donna still in the trunk of the car and traveled down the interstate highway, got off, got Donna Martz out of the car, and had her stripped naked.
As Carolyn watches, Brad rapes Donna.
Carolyn, by allowing him to be able to do something so heinous to this woman, in many ways, Carolyn was raping this woman too.
They were able to purchase a gun while they were on the road.
They then placed the gun at her head. They then shot her, left her naked, alone, hoping that the coyotes and other animals would dispose of the body. And they proceeded on their way.
After killing Donna, they get back in her car, heading south to Mexico. Meanwhile, law enforcement across the country is teaming up to catch them.
Donna was reported missing when she didn't arrive home, when she was supposed to. So naturally, her family, they became concerned.
Carolyn and Brad don't know it, but by the time they reach Nevada, the FBI agents working the Guy Goodman case have tracked them to the Bismarck Hotel in North Dakota, where Donna disappeared. And with the help of local law enforcement, they connect the dots between the two cases.
You had the local police departments from Pennsylvania collaborating with local police departments in Bismarck, collaborating with the FBI and federal agencies, all on a manhunt to track down Brad and Carolyn. And most of that was because they still figured, hey, if we track them down, there's a chance that Donna may be alive.
The task force calls every police department from the Canadian border to the Mexican border, with orders to find Donna's car. Their canvassing pays off only a few days later, once the couple reaches California.
Outside of San Diego, a California highway patrolman spotted their car.
As he got closer, the car began to speed up.
A desperate Carolyn knows if she and Brad are caught, they can kiss any dream of a life together goodbye.
Carolyn was driving the car, weaving in and out of traffic, going through stop signs and stoplights.
The chase comes to a violent end when Carolyn speeds through an intersection and is T-boned by another car. Carolyn and Brad survive the collision unharmed and are taken into custody. That afternoon, Brad gives up the location of Donna Martz's body, and 2 days later, her remains are found. Under hours of questioning, their stories don't match up.
Brad basically admitted that, yes, he was involved. He and Carolyn had committed these acts together.
But the hot seat doesn't intimidate Carolyn, who claims she was there in the name of love.
Carolyn's focus seemed to have been that she was an unwitting non-participant just along for the ride, and that this was all Bradley Martin who did all of these acts, and that she was just an innocent babe.
Carolyn's apparent narcissism is fed in so many different ways. She leaves her children, she gets involved in these horrific crimes, but then at the end, just to trump all of this, she turns on Brad, the guy that she was controlling, and supposedly had this intense relationship with.
Carolyn and Brad are extradited to Pennsylvania for the murder of Guy Goodman. In jail awaiting her court date, Carolyn King gets some unexpected news.
It was discovered that Carolyn was pregnant.
9 months later, Carolyn gives birth in custody to Brad's son. It's the first and last time she will ever see him. Tried separately for the murder of Guy Goodman, Carolyn and Brad are found guilty, and both are sentenced to death. The pair pleads guilty and receives life in prison for the murder of Donna Martz.
The right thing was the implementation of the death sentence. The families of Guy Goodman and Donna Martz now at least have a final chapter.
Post-conviction, the one-time lovers display noticeably different behavior.
When Bradley Martin was sentenced, there was indications that he did feel remorse for what had happened.
Carolyn expressed no remorse about any of the activities. Her focus seemed to have been that she was an unwitting non-participant
She walked out of her marriage, she walked away from her kids, looking for adventure in her life, and boy, did she find it.
Many people might think that there was a drastic change from working an honest job to going on a killing spree, that people don't operate in a vacuum. This woman was a ticking time bomb, indicative of someone who was mentally unstable for quite some time, and we saw the consequences of that.
In Indianapolis, Jennifer Brundage truly believes she has found the love of her life.
They loved each other. They had discussed spending the rest of their lives together.
But when distance threatens to keep the lovers apart, she goes to great lengths to hold on to her man.
He was gunned down for no reason. Could have backed away from this plot.
She was committed to do whatever it took, even if it meant committing murder.
She got caught up in the love for her man.
And later, in New Jersey, Sade Harris has always played by the rules growing up.
She had never been in trouble before.
Until she meets a man that takes her on an unlawful ride.
And he tapped into an emotion that he wants to exploit.
She was just infatuated, and she was just going along for the ride.
There are hundreds of thousands of women in prison at any given time in the U.S. These are the true stories of women who committed heinous crimes in the name of love. For my man. In her hometown of New Palestine, Indiana, 17-year-old Jennifer Brundage has lived the sweet life.
Jennifer had a good relationship with her family. She had both parents at home. She had a very well-to-do, comfortable childhood.
She lived in a nice area, nice homes, a lot of really, professional people that are well-educated, have a lot of advantages, and she was a pretty good student in school.
Even though the straight-A student seems to have it all, she still longs for something more.
Some of the other girls in the class seem to be a little more popular than Jennifer, but overall, she's looking to explore more of a social life.
But that's proving to be a bit of a task in this sleepy town.
There's not much to do in New Pal other than whatever there is to do in high school. She always wanted to go to the big city, which around here is Indianapolis.
There are some people who are very content to be in their small towns because it gives them what they need for their soul. But then you have other people who are afraid of being stuck, if you will, in a small town. They dream of the adventure of the big city.
Her dreams are one step closer to becoming a reality when she graduates high school and gets accepted to Indiana University's School of Business in the fall. Until then, Jennifer samples all that Indianapolis has to offer just 30 minutes west.
Jennifer was really eager to just start a new life and just have some new experiences. So she found a group of people in Indianapolis who she was having fun with. They were different.
On a night out with her new friends, she meets 19-year-old Kenneth Kelly.
He was someone that Jennifer had never known, had never experienced. He was a young African-American male who was nice to her, gave her attention, and probably made her feel special.
Kenneth appeared to be relatively well-adjusted, and those people close to him would say he had a certain type of charisma or charm about him.
But unlike Jennifer, Kenneth couldn't afford to go to college after high school, so he waits tables at a local restaurant to make ends meet.
He's from a pretty rough background, a pretty rough neighborhood. A lot of his friends have been arrested or have gone to jail. He does not have a criminal history. However, he has struggled to really move forward in his life. Everyone loves him. He's a really nice and likable person.
Though Jennifer and Kenneth come from different backgrounds, they're quick to merge their worlds.
When you look at that old saying that opposites attract, for some couples that's really true. I think part of the allure is learning something really different from what you're used to.
They began to start dating, and eventually they were head over heels in love and spending time together almost daily. She was leaving to go to college in a few months, but they were really sound and confident that they were meant to be together and they wanted to spend their lives together.
But finding the means to be together is proving to be a challenge for the young couple.
They lived probably about 25 to 30 miles, if not more, apart. And Jennifer was the only one with a mode of transportation. Jennifer had her own car, but Kenny didn't. That was becoming a problem as the summer went on, as she prepared to go to Indiana University.
Once classes start, Jennifer will be too busy with school to pick Kenneth up. With the hour distance between Bloomington and Indianapolis, it will be impossible for them to find the time to see each other. With no car or the means to buy his own ride to see his girl, Kenneth struggles to find a solution to their problem.
And it put a strain on their relationship. He didn't discourage her from going to college, but it was stressing the couple out to make sure they would be able to spend time together.
For young couples, they really need that together time. They need that face-to-face contact. And so when you look at their becoming separated, it can be a real recipe for disaster.
And as thoughts of how to maintain his relationship weigh heavily on his mind, Kenneth hopes for a quick fix to his problems. Then, one day, his prayers are answered while spending time at the house on the block with the cool mom, Linda Scheimer.
And Kenneth spent a lot of time over there because he was friends of Linda's children.
Kenny went to the home, presumably to hang out with friends. No one was there, but Linda said it was okay. He could hang out and watch television while he waited for others to arrive.
And they were watching television. And there was a commercial for a Cadillac came on the TV.
If I had one of those
He expresses to Linda that he wants to have that car. He really would love if he could have that Cadillac so that he could go visit Jennifer when she goes off to college in a couple months.
Upon hearing this, Linda's ears perk up.
Cadillac? As she listened to Kenny lament about how he wanted and really needed a car to continue his relationship with Jennifer, Linda had issues of her own and figured that there might be a way that she and Kenny could help each other.
This was an opportunity that Linda had been waiting for, and she finally found someone who she could pray on to help her complete her sick and twisted idea.
With that, Linda offers Kenny a very dangerous proposition. And with a little help from Jennifer, her devious plan can go off without a hitch.
She was committed to do whatever it took, even if it meant committing murder.
This is a sick, twisted plot.
In Indianapolis, Jennifer Brundage's boyfriend, Kenneth Kelly, confides in his friend's mom, Linda Scheimer, his desire to own his very own Cadillac so he can visit his girlfriend once she goes off to college in the fall.
As Kenneth was confiding in Linda, Linda made Kenneth a very generous promise.
Linda told Kenny that she could help him get that Cadillac. She knew someone who had the exact Cadillac that he was admiring through the car commercial.
But in order for her to help him, Kenneth has to help her first. She explains that her 25-year friendship with her best friend, Samantha Dobbins, has hit a rough patch because she despises Samantha's husband of 9 years, Brett.
Linda felt that Brett got in the way of her relationship with her friend Samantha. She felt he was not good for her best friend and wanted him essentially out of the picture.
Linda makes a proposition to Kenneth
that if he can kill Brett Dobbins, she will find a way to give Kenneth one of Brett's Cadillacs. And one is very similar to the one that Kenneth saw in the commercial.
When we're looking at emotions, really disliking someone, or even worse, hating someone may lead to irrational thoughts. And most people, though, thank goodness, don't act out on it.
I think that Kenny was originally surprised by Linda's request, but ultimately he looked at it and thought that it was a manner to achieve his goal of having a vehicle and of being closer to the woman he wanted to be with.
With his mind spinning, Kenneth tells Linda that he'll think about her proposition and heads home. Later that night, Jennifer goes to Kenneth's house and he shares the conversation that took place earlier that day.
Jennifer was shocked and not impressed. But Kenny believed it was really the only way that he could get what he needed to keep he and Jennifer together. She tried to talk him out of it, convinced that there had to be another way.
Despite her efforts to talk him out of the hideous plan, her loyalty to Kenneth gets the best of her.
Ultimately, Jennifer agreed to help Kenneth with the murder.
When a person is in a state of desperation, they're probably not thinking clearly and they're acting on impulse and therefore may make all of the wrong decisions.
A few days later, the couple meets up with Linda Scheimer to let her know they're willing to go through with the plan.
Linda provided Kenny with all of the information he needed to get this job done. She also rode with Kenny and Jennifer in Jennifer's car to show them exactly where the Dobbins house was located.
They ride 30 minutes away from Indianapolis. Linda shows them exactly where they live. She shows them their driveway. Linda even goes as far as telling Kenneth exactly what time Brett leaves to work every morning.
She suggests that with no one around early that hour, there will be no witnesses and they can easily pull off the hit.
Kenneth and Jennifer are still very naive, still very desperate, still very trustworthy of Linda, so they continue to follow Linda's master plan.
Sometimes it's very easy for young people to be manipulated by an older person. I mean, think about it. The young person is very inexperienced. They're looking to that older person for guidance, and sometimes that older person can take them in a very bad place.
In the days that follow, Kenneth is determined to get the job done, and he needs the right weapon for the attack.
Kenneth decided that a gun would be better to carry out this murder. He set out to go get a gun from one of his cousins, Ray. Kenneth didn't give Ray many details, but he did mention it to him. Ray blew it off and thought Kenneth was just talking and joking. However, Ray did let Kenneth borrow his gun.
A week later, Jennifer continues to stand by her man as they head 30 miles east to Eden with a strategy in place and a weapon in hand.
She drove Kenny to the Dobbins residence in the wee hours of the morning, long before Brett Dobbins was supposed to leave the home on his way to work.
Kenneth instructed Jennifer to park approximately a block away so she would be out of the view of the Dobbins home. At that time, Kenneth got out of the vehicle and Jennifer moved the vehicle as instructed.
She sits nervously in the driver's seat as she waits for her boyfriend. She can't see the Dobbins' home from where she's parked, so she can't immediately tell if he will get the job done. And right on time, as the clock hits 5:30 a.m., Brett emerges from his home, unaware that danger is lurking right behind him.
He never saw Kenny approach from behind.
Kenneth came up behind Brett and shot him in the back.
Caught off guard, Brett falls to the ground and screams out.
Brett had no idea he would be a victim.
Jennifer and Kenneth were in deeper than they ever imagined.
And later, Sade Harris goes to great lengths to secure a future with a man she believes is the love of her life.
The lifestyle that Jarrell was providing may have played a role in her willingness to go along with helping Jarrell.
Jarrell has controlled her mind and impressed her so much that she will do almost anything to make him happy.
Where did he go?
In the early morning hours in Eden, Indiana, Jennifer Brundage and her boyfriend, Kenneth Kelly, have just carried out the planned hit on 55-year-old Brett Dobbins outside of his home.
Kenneth shot him in the back, and then Mr. Dobbins fell to the ground. He then began to scream in pain. Kenneth then returned and fired another shot, after which there was no more sounds from Mr. Dobbins.
Once he's sure that Brett is dead, Kenneth runs back to the car where Jennifer awaits nervously. In his haste to make a quick getaway, he forgets to place the small bag of marijuana Linda had given him on Brett's body.
Kenny's only concern was leaving the scene as quickly as possible. Kenny jumped in Jennifer's car. Jennifer looked at Kenny and said, "That was loud. I could hear him screaming from here."
Jennifer was concerned that if she heard it, someone else possibly could have heard or saw something as well.
We gotta go.
The two immediately flee from the scene.
They quickly got out of the neighborhood and they were hungry, so they went to a fast food restaurant, and then they left there and went back to Kenneth's home where they took a nap.
Back at the Dobbins residence, a phone call wakes up Brett's wife, Samantha, around 7:30 a.m.
Hello? Brett was known for being on time every time at his place of employment. When his boss called the family to find out if something had gone wrong, Samantha went outside to see if his car was still there. That's when Samantha found her husband, Brett, dead in their front yard.
She was horrified, shocked, and devastated when she found her husband dead on the ground.
They didn't have any known enemies. They were in a nice, quiet neighborhood. Brett was on his normal daily routine, so to see that your husband is gunned down in your driveway is very frightening.
She immediately calls 911 as neighbors begin to pour out of their homes to investigate Samantha's loud cries echoing through the street.
Once the police arrived, they scoured the neighborhood to see if they could find anything.
The only evidence found at the scene were shell casings from a weapon.
Meanwhile, Jennifer and Kenneth continue to lay low in Indianapolis.
After Kenny and Jennifer woke up from their nap, they went to Linda Scheimer's house to inform her that they had, in fact, done what she had asked them to do.
It's fine. Yes.
Good.
After giving Linda the lowdown on Brett's murder, Kenneth asks her when he'll get the Cadillac that she had promised.
Give me what I want.
Linda told Kenneth that they needed to wait so that no one would be suspicious. She also probably didn't think it would be a good idea to ask her best friend about a vehicle when her husband had just been murdered.
The teens leave Linda's home and pretend the day's events never happened. A week later, Jennifer leaves for Bloomington to start her freshman year at the university, while Kenneth remains in Indianapolis. Despite the guilt they are feeling, both agree to never speak of what they have done. But before they can fully move on, Kenneth has to make sure he gets rid of anything that can trace the murder back to them.
Kenneth returns the gun back to his cousin, Ray.
Having no idea that the gun had bodies on it, Ray puts the gun back in the glove compartment of his girlfriend's car. The following day, detectives knock on Ray's door when his gun is linked to the murder through ballistics testing.
The detectives were questioning Ray. They were inquiring about his handgun and if it had been used in a crime or if he had loaned it to anybody. And at that time, Ray responded, "Yeah, my cousin Kenneth used my gun recently."
Having linked the gun to Kenny, authorities arrested Kenny at his home. Kenny informed authorities that his girlfriend Jennifer had been involved in the commission of the crime. He also said Linda Scheimer had orchestrated the entire thing.
Police charge Kenneth Kelly with murder. A day later, just 1 week into the fall semester, police arrest Jennifer Brundage for her role in the murder of Brett Dobbins.
Jennifer also cooperated with the police, and she told them everything.
Sometimes, no matter how loving a couple may be, no matter how much they may have protected one another, when law enforcement comes down on them, they'll turn on each other on a dime.
Jennifer Brundage is charged with murder and conspiracy to commit murder, and a felony charge of assisting a criminal. The day after Jennifer's arrest, police track down Linda Scheimer and charge her with felony murder and conspiracy to commit murder. Jennifer and Kenneth both take a plea deal and agree to testify against Linda. And despite their arrests, the two lovers maintain their relationship.
And while both parties are in the Hancock County Jail, they found a way to sneak letters to one another.
The couple vows to stand by each other and comes up with a plan to make sure they'll be together through the end of time.
Just a few days before Linda Scheimer's trial, Kenny was found unresponsive in his jail cell. Kenny was rushed to the hospital, which also prompted a check of the entire jail, where Jennifer was then found appearing intoxicated. She was also rushed to the hospital.
Both Jennifer and Kenneth were receiving some medication while they were incarcerated. They kind of stashed away the medicine over a period of time.
Couples who believe that they're truly in love will do anything to be together. If they're forced apart, then you have to look at the Romeo and Juliet syndrome. If they can't be together in life, then they'll be together in death.
Jennifer and Kenneth each recover from their failed suicide attempt and testifies in Linda's trial. In line with their plea deals, Jennifer Brundage is sentenced to 8 years in prison for assisting a criminal. Kenneth Kelly is sentenced to 55 years in prison for the murder of Brett Dobbins. Although Linda Scheimer maintains her innocence, a jury finds her guilty of murder and conspiracy to commit and is sentenced to 55 years in prison. In the end, following her heart instead of her mind cost Jennifer everything.
Young love can be manipulated to do just about anything. However, that love is not worth the price to be paid.
This couple, they were so desperately in love that they traded their emotions and addictions for one another for clear thinking and common sense.
Jennifer made some life-changing decisions that have cost her her future.
Jennifer Brundage risked her freedom and her all for the deep love she had for her man. 700 miles away in New Jersey, Sade Harris's desire to secure a life with her new boyfriend puts her promising future in jeopardy. Hailing from a loving household in Trenton, 18-year-old Sade is a typical teen who plays by the rules.
Sade was known to be a good student, had never been in trouble with the law, and had come really from a solid middle-class background.
Her mother and father both worked, held full-time jobs. I believe her father was in his position for 20-plus years, if not longer.
After graduating from high school, she enrolls herself in college while still living under her parents' roof.
Sade entered a community college where she was pursuing a degree in nursing.
But by her junior year in, she hits a bump on the road.
She became pregnant, and she continued in her studies despite the fact that she was a single mother. That must have been very challenging because nursing is certainly not an easy degree.
When people have a goal or a dream that they want to achieve, they really work very hard at it. And the more roadblocks thrown in their way, well, it just motivates them to work that much harder.
By the time Sade turns 22, she is an honor student with only 3 semesters left before becoming a registered nurse. But with all her accomplishments and the support of her family, there's one thing she's missing in her life: love.
Sade is looking for that love that she feels as if she can intimately have with a partner to take her life forward. She has a good family background, so she wants that in her own life.
When one grows up in a loving and stable family, it's only a natural tendency to not only want to be a successful adult, but to pass on that same kind of environment to then your family and children.
Then, as if by fate, Cupid strikes one winter night while she attends a college party and meets 24-year-old store clerk Jarrell Mulkey.
They became fast friends and then just started hanging out together.
The attraction and relationship developed very quickly, and that within a short time of meeting, they were seeing each other frequently.
The new couple hit the most expensive restaurants and the hottest clubs around town, with Jarrell footing the bill every time.
Jarrell was clearly spending a lot of money on her, and she apparently enjoyed that. The source of his money was never a question, as far as I know, in her mind, even though the amount of money that he was spending might be more than one would think a salesman in an apparel store could make.
But what Sade doesn't realize is that her new beau has a deep, dark secret that enables him to afford his expensive lifestyle.
He entered the bank, presented a demand note indicating that he had a gun. He left the bank with approximately $4,000.
Sade had no idea of the potential dangers to which this relationship would expose her.
What she doesn't know could cost her everything.
Jersey girl Sade Harris is head over heels for her new boyfriend, Jarrell Mulkey, who spoils her with expensive dates and nonstop partying. But she's in the dark on how he seems to have a never-ending flow of cash.
She may have some questions as to where the cash is coming from, but she's pushing that aside at this point.
Sometimes in new relationships, we don't tend to see the imperfections of that new partner because in many ways, we want to keep that feeling of love and excitement.
Then, a few days later, Sade leaves her house to pick up Jarrell. He asks her to drive him to a bank so he can make a withdrawal. But on the way there, he makes a joke that catches her off guard.
I was like, let's go in and rob the bank right now.
Mulkey indicated, hey, what would you think if I robbed the bank? She just kind of laughed and said, you wouldn't do that, would you?
Thinking nothing of it, Sade parks the car in front of the bank as Jarrell walks inside.
Jarrell enters the bank without a disguise and hands the teller a note. The note says, I have a gun. Give me $3,000. Don't push the alarm.
He was given a sum of money and exited the bank, and Sade drove him away, not aware that he had actually just committed a bank robbery.
That old saying that ignorance is bliss is really true. It's just easy to turn that blind eye and just keep on going, or as we say, just go with the flow.
The pair walks away with $4,000 and celebrate. They have a romantic dinner for two. The following week, Sade is blindsided when Jarrell heads out of town to visit family in Houston, and the two agree to take a small break in their relationship while he's gone. And without skipping a beat, he plans to make sure his wallet is full while he's there.
After arriving in Houston, Jarrell established contact with a female acquaintance named Latasha Weber, who some people would describe as an on-again, off-again girlfriend.
Not knowing his real intentions, she drives him to a bank, thinking he's going to cash a check. She remains in the car as he walks inside and employs his signature move. He successfully walks out of the bank with more money than he came in with, but that's not enough for him, and decides to hit another bank a couple days later.
While we obviously don't know for sure what was in his mind, the fact that by this time he had already committed a number of bank robberies and had been successful in doing so suggests that he was going to continue on this pattern.
In 1 month, he's robbed 2 banks and got $9,000 in cash.
Back home in the Garden State, Sade busies herself with school while her serial bank robber boy toy continues to make moves.
She probably had no idea what was happening.
When someone is in love, they want to keep that good feeling going. They will tend to turn a blind eye. For Sade, it was out of sight, out of mind. She could have gotten out of the whole thing because she didn't know anything was happening anyway.
For the next month, Jarrell parties it up with Latasha, having little to no contact with Sade. But eventually, he knows it's time to go back home. And when he arrives back in New Jersey, Sade's there with open arms.
Things seem to be going well at this point for Jarrell and Shade. He's been doing well financially, and there's nothing that says that there's been any break in the romanticism of their relationship, despite what may be going on and off with Latasha in Houston.
After a little over a month of dating on and off, the money begins to wear down, and Jarrell knows it's time to do another bank job, but he's going to need some help. So he decides to fully let Shade in on his money-making scheme, and she assists him in the next hit.
He's kind of taking advantage of her mind and her innocence. He's got control of her thought processes. And she's very, very open at this time to do a lot of things that he says do.
She was probably lulled into a false sense of security and would do things that she normally wouldn't have done.
Willing to do anything for her man, she agrees. And a couple days later, around noon, with Shade at the wheel of her own car, the couple arrives at a bank in Lawrenceville, just outside of Trenton.
He instructs her to go in the bank and get a deposit slip. Shade nervously follows his instructions, goes into the bank, gets the deposit slip, comes back out to the car, gives the deposit slip to Jarrell.
He then subsequently fills out the slip indicating that this is a bank robbery, I have a gun, and goes in and passes that slip to the teller and robs the bank.
Jarrell casually walks out of the bank with $1,900 in his pocket and joins Shade, where she's been waiting obediently. Once she has had a chance to calm her nerves, she whisks them and their loot away.
At this point, considering Jarrell's success rate in robbing banks, and now he's enlisted a new partner, we don't know what could be next.
With banks throughout Jersey on high alert, the new dynamic duo is just getting started.
Engagement with this activity with Jarrell, Shade was taking risks far greater than I think she imagined.
Shade Harris is in the driver's seat of a getaway car after she and boyfriend Jarrell Mulkey rob a bank in Lawrenceville, New Jersey.
Shade and Jarrell got away with $1,900 on the bank robbery.
Risk takers, or people who take a lot of risk, really do believe in that saying, no risk, no reward. So when they get that reward, it almost becomes addictive, that they have to do even more things in order to get a larger reward.
Feeling confident they can pull off another job and double up the money, the duo decides to strike again.
He had Shade drive him to a bank in Hamilton, New Jersey.
The new Bonnie and Clyde hope to rob the bank in the same fashion as their previous heist. But once inside, Shade's nerves get the best of her.
She really didn't know what she was doing. And she kind of stumbled and was inquiring about opening an account. And when the teller asked her for ID, she didn't know what to do.
She clearly had the presence of mind to know not to have her real identification, or at least not to show it. But at the same time, she hadn't thought through what would happen when the teller asks for identification when she asked about opening an account.
People who are engaging in antisocial behaviors or are up to no good are often anxious, they're often nervous because they know that they could be busted at any time.
The bank employee is suspicious as Shade quickly leaves the bank and goes back to the car where Jarrell is waiting. When she walks out the door, the perceptive banker picks up the phone to report the unusual encounter.
The teller was very observant and was able to identify that she was acting suspicious, and she contacted local authorities with that information.
Armed with the tip from the teller, the FBI started looking into different bank robberies with similar MOs. It was the information from the teller regarding the vehicle that first allowed the FBI to link that vehicle to potentially the other robberies.
4 days later, Shade and Jarrell target another bank in Hamilton, New Jersey.
Upon arriving there, Jarrell went in and followed his usual MO. This time, he wore a hat, but he still did not attempt to disguise himself.
He walks out of the bank, and this time, he has $1,400, and he drives off with Shade.
As the couple takes off, They are unaware that a witness has spotted Jarrell leaving the bank and getting into Sade's car. The do-gooder is able to get the full license plate number and description of the car and calls the police.
At that point, we were able to link that robbery to the Lawrence robbery, as well as the attempt or the casing of the Sun Bank in Hamilton, New Jersey. We looked at the surveillance video from all three banks, and we were able to determine what appeared to be this black male who entered those banks prior to the robberies, as well as the same black female.
With the corroborated witness, they're able to get the name of the owner of the car. And the owner of the car is none other than Sade Harris.
Sometimes even good kids do bad things. And it's either because of being influenced by a negative peer group or just plain teen rebellion.
Meanwhile, the couple continues to spend the money from the robberies on booze and partying around Jersey, completely unaware that their wild nights of drunken debauchery are numbered. A couple days after identifying Sade as the getaway driver, the FBI and the local police pay her a visit at her parents' house in Trenton, where she lives.
They told her of the nature of the investigation and indicated to her that her vehicle, or at least a vehicle looking like hers, had potentially been involved in a number of bank robberies.
Knowing that the jig is up, Sade makes a stunning admission.
She acknowledged her role in the bank robberies and exactly what she did, as well as Jarrell Mulkey, where they went after the bank robberies, what they did with some of the proceeds.
Sade's cooperation included her not only acknowledging that Jarrell Mulkey was the other individual involved, but she identified him and specifically identified specific photographs from bank surveillance videos as Jarrell Mulkey being the individual depicted.
Sometimes when people are caught because they were influenced by someone else to commit that crime, they're going to save themselves. They're going to look at that person who influenced them and say, wait a minute, it's me or that other person. I'm gonna save my own skin.
After Sade's confession and after her implicating Jarrell in the robberies, charges were filed both locally and federally on Sade and also on Jarrell. Now, Sade was taken into custody immediately after she confessed.
But when they try to arrest her partner in crime, he's nowhere to be found. And law enforcement will not rest until he's in police custody.
He could be anywhere. He's a fugitive on the run.
Garden State gal Sade Harris sits in the back seat of a police car on robbery charges, while her fugitive boyfriend of 2 months, Jarrell Mulkey, has made his way back to Houston.
He doesn't even know what's going on in New Jersey and that Sade has been arrested and charged. He's reconnected with Latasha, and at this point in time, he's about ready to make his next move.
Jarrell walks into a bank while Latasha remains in the car.
Same MO, walks in, no disguise, same note, whispering voice, walks out with his biggest hit yet. He gets 14 grand.
When a person commits the same crime over and over again, look, it's just human nature that they're going to get better at it. You get away with it the first time, second time, third time, so you'll just keep doing it because you think now that you've mastered it.
But this time, Sade is speaking up where it counts. She informs the feds that when he's not in Jersey, Jarrell's partial to the Lone Star State. And they're hot on his heels.
We coordinated with our federal bank robbery coordinator in Houston, sent some photos, and they were able to identify Jarrell Mulkey as having possibly been involved in a couple bank robberies in Houston as well, based on the information that we were able to provide from New Jersey.
What makes it so easy and so simple is that this bank robber does not have a disguise when he goes in and robs the bank.
Texas.
He is transferred back to New Jersey, where he faces 6 federal charges of robbery. Latasha Weber is also arrested and charged with 3 counts of robbery. With Jarrell in custody, the FBI also charges Sade as an accomplice to 2 of the New Jersey robberies.
Sade was sentenced to 10 months incarceration, of which she served 5, and she was ordered to pay restitution of $3,300 and also had to undergo supervised release for 3 years.
That saying, honesty is the best policy, is true, and it was especially true for Sade, because when she cooperated, it ended up in her cutting a deal and getting a much lighter sentence.
As for Jarrell's Houston hookup, Latasha Weber, a jury finds her not guilty of the 3 counts of robbery charges against her. And finally, Jarrell Mulkey pleads guilty to 6 counts of bank robbery and receives a sentence of 6.5 years in prison with 3 years supervised release. He is also ordered to pay $30,300 in restitution, but the time he spent in the big house does nothing to change his ways.
After serving 78 months in federal prison, he's again arrested for robbing additional banks in the Houston area and is sentenced to 46 months in jail.
There are 2 scenarios you might see with people who've done time and now are released to society. One set of individuals have been rehabilitated. They perhaps really do believe what they did was wrong and live a productive life. And then you have those who tend to resort back to their ways of crime.
In the end, Sade put too much trust in a man who took her for a ride.
Just like looks can be deceiving, words can be deceiving, feelings can be deceiving, and emotions can be deceiving.
Trust is one of those things that needs to be the foundation of a relationship. It needs to be earned and needs to be built day by day. But if you have blind trust and you know nothing about that individual, well, then you may be letting yourself in for a big, big fall.
I think my advice to anybody is to really be careful before you get into a committed relationship. If what they're doing is something that is risky or can get you into trouble, I would turn and run as fast as I could.
Kill.
Oh, yeah. Má thằng này chạy nhiều chóng mặt mày. Hương ơi bớt đi em. Nóng thế nhỉ? Lãng mạn 19 độ. Xịn đấy.
Triple kill.
Yo. Nick nhầm. Nick. Lát.
Killing spree. Killing spree. Killing spree.
Thôi em à.
Killing spree.
Tốt rồi.
Killing spree.
hả? Tốt rồi. Mình xíu. Rồi, một đấm.